Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Shirley, and I will be your moderator tonight. I am excited to welcome Dr. Nick Ciardello and Alan Withall as our speakers tonight. Dr. C, a New Jersey native, Dr. Nick, a New Jersey native and Rutgers School of Dental Medicine graduate, has built a distinguished career in cosmetic and surgical dentistry, serving New Jersey City and Hoboken for nearly 6 years. He's a lifelong learner, and he holds notable certifications, including graduation from the prestigious Coase Center. Did I pronounce that right? Coase? Coase Center and Implant Pathway. And in 2023, he received the Fellowship Award from the International Congress of Implantologists. Additionally, Dr. Nick's substantial social media following has led to partnerships with major dental brands, showcasing his expertise in cosmetic dentistry. And Alan Withall also with us this evening, originally a Wisconsin native who moved out to New Jersey to work at Henry Schein Dental in 2013. Then in 2014, Alan recognized a need for a more business-focused study group to better engage younger dentists in the startup process and developed the FYI Study Club New York. Since then, Alan continues to network and brand himself as one of the go-to consultants in the tri-state area for dental startups. So welcome both of you tonight.
Thank you, Shirley, for the introduction, and go Packers, by the way.
Go Pack, go.
Cool.
Go Pack. So, want to
before we get started.
Sorry.
Oh yeah. Oh, I just wanted to get some house rules for you guys.
Yeah,
for everyone. It's like, cool. Before we get started, I do want to take a moment to go over some quick housekeeping. If you guys have a question, we really want to hear your questions, and we invite you to please type them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we're going to answer them live at the end of the presentation. CE is not available for this webinar, but we will be recording it, and it will be mailed out over the coming week. So I now hand it over to you, Dr. C and Alan, and thank you again for being with us tonight.
Thanks again, Shirley. And thank you, Dr. Nick, and everyone else for joining us tonight. Really excited to go over what it takes and do's and don'ts of doing a startup. So on another note, really highly advise anyone who isn't either following Dr. Nick or myself on Instagram, highly advise you guys follow us for any upcoming CEs, seminars, or on Dr. Nick's end, besides hilarious videos. Lots of clinical content, tons of startup worthy knowledge, and you can see him really take off on his journey in his new practice. So thanks again, Nick.
Yeah, thank you.
So this next slide that we have, I've presented hundreds of times already in the last 10 years I've been with Schein. It's a timeline that shows vision to completion, start to finish on what to expect with working with Henry Schein and myself. And Nick, we went over this probably about 3 years ago after we connected on a call and met at a Starbucks in Hoboken, right?
Yep, I remember that, man. It seemed like a very long time ago, but
so here we are, and the presentation itself takes about an hour and a half. So that's not what we're going to do today. But what we're going to do is really touch on a lot of the hot things that we can't get through today. So. Speaking on how we met, Nick, why did you really pick Henry Schein and myself to work with on your startup?
Yeah, man. So, and thanks again for having me. I really appreciate that. So, obviously in the beginning, when you're looking for equipment specialists, there's a bunch of companies that you could work with. And, I actually, got quotes from 3 or 4 different companies, and I ended up, obviously going with Alan. But the thing is, one of the other dental equipment companies, I actually had my father's best friend actually work there. And, I established such a good relationship with Alan over the years, and he's always been in touch. He's always provided me with good, if I ever needed something, I can text him right away. And he's always had an answer for me. And he was always someone who went out of his way to kind of help me. And not only that, given my age and Alan's age, I like to grow with my company. I'm young 30s. I'm hoping to be practicing for 15, 20, 25 years or so. So for me, going for someone around my same age, kind of is going to grow and develop with me throughout this whole thing was very important for me. And I was very happy I did so, because even on my first day of clinic, you know, I had an issue with the water, my water line not working like an hour before we're seeing patients. And I called Alan right away, and he had like 3 other people on the phone, like getting in their ear to help me. I said, "You better get it started." I was like, all right, I chose correctly, I think, here.
We got it done. We got it done.
We
Yeah.
did. We did.
And you know, I know you did end up choosing a consulting company to work with for your project. We can admit those can be quite costly and isn't necessarily in everybody's budget. You did decide to go through with that. Could you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah. So, you know, initially when I was, you know, I don't have any family in dentistry. So for me, like, I really didn't know how to build really an office, right? You know, I had some vague idea, but nothing about the specifics of financials, bank loans, you know, setting up X, Y, and Z. And I was introduced to a couple different consultants by my financial advisors who they've worked with. And, you know, I got a few different, you know, number figures. You know, some of these can be anywhere from $40,000 to $70,000, maybe even more, maybe even less. And it's a big financial obligation, because when you're talking a startup, $50,000 can be a CT unit these days. It can be a scanner. It can be this. So, like, if you're going to get a consultant company, you're really taking a leap of faith that that's going to turn out and help you on the back end, which, you know, I think for the most part, a lot of consultants, so they will save you money, but perhaps you can get it done a different way. And I think that's one of the things that Alan does, that looking back at it, I might have went that way just because that money would have been great to have for marketing first month. And I could have used Alan to do most of this stuff. But at the time, I didn't know Alan as well as I did now when I was making that decision. And I was just like, I don't know. And then
Yeah. You're like, I trust you, but I don't.
I wasn't sure. And then my financial people, but again, really look into if you are going to get a consultant. It is a financial obligation. You have to see what they're with it, how long they're going to be with you. Are they staying on with you after? Are they providing systems for your office? All these things are very important to ask, because one consultant varies so much from another. So make sure you know what you're buying into and spending all your money on.
100%. I couldn't have said that better myself. Every time I get on a startup call with a dentist, I'm like, hey, it's not that the consultants aren't worth it. It's just that between myself and the rest of the Head Shine team, we like to say that we do what they do, but we do it for free, you know, in return for your supplies and equipment. And even when you work with those consultants, you still have to buy your equipment supplies from somebody. So you ended up working with both of us anyway. And you could have, like you said, taken that 50 to 70 grand and put it towards an even more kick-ass marketing plan, right?
Exactly. Because every penny matters right now. Because, you know, I opened last Monday, and, you know, money's starting to get a little tight because now I have a payroll. Now I have my marketing expenses. My rent's about to kick in. My loan payment's about to kick in. So that's all money that, you know, if you do it the right way and you do your research, you could probably find a way to do it without having to spend that big paycheck.
Thank you. And so speaking about money, you know, there are a lot of banks out there, and I know that you ended up settling on Provide. Could you speak about how you went about picking the financial institution that you decided to work with?
Yeah. So initially, you know, I had got 3 different, let's say, packages, right, from 3 different banks and, you know, with different rates and their different terms. For me, I ultimately ended up with Provide because they were one of the newer ones on the block compared to some of the other big names that people probably know. And for me, everything was online. You upload documents online. Everything was very quick. There was a nice portal to it. And I got a very good rate for them at the time, because this was about 2.5 years ago that I signed with them. So yeah. And they were also very easy about increasing my loan amounts. Like, initially, I think it was $650, then it went to $7, then it went to $750. And like, for me, they increased it without asking me too many questions. As long as I was still making money as my associateship, they were like, okay, we know you need it, we'll give it to you. So that was very important for me, knowing someone can flip that money if I need it. Not only that, one thing I didn't like about some of the other companies is like they're a little archaic in nature, and like you have to ask every little thing for them. You have this lot of paperwork, and mine seemed like the Provide seemed like it was a little bit less paperwork in the front end, which I ended up appreciating. Obviously, being busy, it's nice not having to do all those little things.
100%. And one thing that, if we were to go back up to the timeline, actually, just getting financially approved is one of the very first steps, because a lot of your colleagues, will be like so gung-ho that they're like, I got to find a broker. Let's go look at spaces. And the reality is most landlords won't even talk to you until you're pre-approved from a bank. And then also when you get pre-approved, they'll tell you roughly how much your annual budget will be for how much you can afford for rent. So, they'll take all your liabilities and say, I think the average is anywhere between $6,000 and $10,000 most banks give for a rental allowance. So that's, you just have to know that going into this. Otherwise, you don't know what size space to get.
Exactly. And mine falls kind of right in the middle of that. So his number's spot on. I think I was 6,600 or so. So it definitely makes sense.
Awesome. And just as a side note too, there are unique ways when you hire a specific person. We'll get into this right now for lease negotiations, that let's say you have a $6,600 budget for rent. There are unique ways where whomever you pick to do your lease negotiations, I generally always recommend getting someone dental specific for every category and every step of doing your project, because we know what we're doing, right? You may pay a small premium for that service, but they know the ins and outs of, for example, a lease contract. And if you just fell in love with a space, there are ways that, let's say it was $8,000, you could say, hey, Dr. Nick only has a budget for $6,600. For the first and second year, you'll pay that $6,600 in the hopes that by the third year, you'll be making enough money to afford more. So you may then pay a premium in years 3 and 4, but the landlord could make a deal with you. So ultimately, who did you use for your lease negotiations, and what are some recommendations you could give to your colleagues for that?
So I actually used Rob Montgomery, which is a pretty big name in the ADA. He's pretty much known for doing this. So I didn't directly work with him, but I worked with one of his colleagues at his practice. The only thing that I would recommend for people trying to choose a lawyer is find out up front if it's a flat fee, okay, or if it's something that they're just going to keep ringing up. And for someone like me who had a 2-year long lease negotiation sort of whole thing, my money racked up very, very quickly. And all of a sudden, you think it's $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, and all of a sudden you look back and it's $20,000 or more for your lease negotiations. And you guys might say that's crazy, but if there's squatters at your location, like there was at mine, there's address changes, there's et cetera. Every single one of these steps was a new revision of the lease. And every single one of the steps had more time required by my lawyer to review it. And then all of a sudden I was downward spiraling. I was like, I just got to do it at this point. I'm already so far into it. What am I going to start new with someone else? So look into that. Make sure you know if it's one set fee or if they're just going to keep ringing you for an hourly.
And two companies to recommend, just as a shout out, WeCare Dental Consulting as well as Cirrus Consulting. They both offer flat fees anywhere between $7,000 and $12,000. Both great lease negotiating companies, and there are others out there. So, even recently, I do have a dentist on this call tonight I'm doing a startup for. And unfortunately, I think it was the first space we looked at actually had an exclusivity clause in the lease for a dentist that was in the same complex. And the broker, not being from dental, didn't even think to mention that. We get into negotiations and it was a flop anyway. So had they been using someone by the hour, it would have just been a waste, right?
Yep, I agree. And don't get me wrong, the lawyer used, they were great. But just keep in mind, your budget is the most important thing when you're doing this.
100%. And speaking of budget, we nice. We the big name in the chair industry in the dental industry is ADEC, right? They own such a large portion of the market share, but you ended up going with Belmont. Why?
Yeah, so I would have loved to have ADEC, right? Everyone, that's the number one chair that every single dental rep throws at you because they know it's quality, it lasts, it's it has the name brand, it's Coca-Cola sort of thing, and everyone knows it. Now, for me, when I was looking at the budget, and since I was doing a startup in a city, it definitely is a little bit more expensive than a rural area, right? So I have to keep some like probably a little bit higher rent than most other places, not to mention inspections, et cetera, et cetera. So where can I cut money, right? And for me, I wanted to start with 3 chairs and not 2. And if I went the A deck route, I probably would have only been able to afford 2. And right now, I actually started with a hygienist. So like, I wouldn't have been able to make what I'm doing right now even work with just me and a hygienist working out of 2 rooms. Now, for me, Belmont, when you look at, A deck up here, and then let's say there's the rest of the other bunch kind of in this middle, Belmont for me was one of those middle ones that had a very nice looking chair, has a 25 year history, has great black ultra leather, and I love the look of it and the functionality. So for me, it was a no brainer just because I saved a little bit more cash on this aspect of it and was able to get that extra chair.
And they're both phenomenal companies. And
Both great.
Spring Ray Shine in general, we do have an array of, different manufacturers that we represent. We have showrooms in every state where you can go to look at them. We can take you to practices that we've built. Like, Nick, I'm definitely going to be using your office. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
But one important thing to note too is that you have an office that can fit 7 chairs. And, I'm one of, a consultant, right, who's going to recommend that most offices only start with 2, maybe 3 chairs. But we put the plumbing and electric there ready to go so that when the time is right, we can plan a month and a half out to just plop the chair in and you're ready to go, right?
Yep. So like what I did was, since mine was 7, I actually built out my cabinets and IT for 4, and I put 3 chairs. So the 4th room is ready to go when I need that chair. It just doesn't have the chair. And then the other 3, I don't have anything in yet because they were kind of stuck in the back. And obviously you have to also consider plumbing too, or nitrous, guys. Yeah. So nitrous, adding nitrous per chairs. For me, I'm nitrousing 4 out of the 7 ops. So that means I'm starting with 1 just for the beginning. And each chair you add nitrous adds a significant amount of money. So something you also have to think about when you're choosing chairs, because if you add nitrous, you're getting a little crazy.
Yep, it definitely adds to your construction costs, but it's much better to do early on in the process than to try to do later, right?
Exactly. Not only that, personally, I was never a huge fan of the rollers for nitrous. I never used them when I had a roll in the room. So like, if you're going to do nitrous, to me, it always made sense to just plumb it straight out.
100% agree. And, you mentioned $50,000 earlier for somewhere where you could put that consulting cost to. And Nick, I mean, we happen to create a great relationship together with Vodtech. Why did you ultimately, pick them?
So for me, I needed to have the CBCT with the correct field of view. I wanted a company that had great customer support. And I also wanted someone that was fairly reliable and local to get to. So for me, since I live based out of Jersey City, Vodtech, I think, is in Fort Lee, which I don't know if you guys, is very close to me. I went out to dinner with a bunch of the reps, some of the higher guys up, and I had a great dinner with them. They were very reliable people. Everyone I asked about Vodtech, not a single person gave me anything bad about their customer experience with them, because they are very on point. You need them, they're there right away. They are also, as you can kind of see on the side, they do offer a great new practice bundle. Currently, I started with 2 Easy Ray Airs. I have 1 Easy Cam. I think I have the green CBCT. I have 2 sensors, and then all Easy Dent and Easy Dent Eye for my whole office with Open Dental.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
And talking more about some products, I know you definitely boast about using Sprint Ray as your 3D printer, as well as 3Shape for your intraoral scanner. Why did you pick those to start out with? Some of your colleagues choose to get it later on in life. I know you're going to say it yourself, but I know you scan it.
Yeah. So like, I knew right away how hard it is to establish new systems in an office. I've worked at 14 different offices, and when I came in, I brought some different ideas with me, and I just knew how hard it was to get the team to buy into that. And obviously I wasn't the owner in any of those, but when you start adding technology to offices that are not used to technology, it's just going to stagger the growth for a little bit while you're having growing pains. And for me, I knew I wanted to have my growing pains in the beginning. When I was training the staff, I took 2 weeks before I opened doors to train my staff. So they went through their trios training, they went through the Sprint Ray training, they did all that stuff. And then these first 2 weeks, we're starting all new patient appointments at 90 minutes. So I'm giving my hygienist time to learn the Trios and use it. So now every single patient who comes in, like he was saying, I'm scanning them at day 1 and 1 year and every year after that to monitor progress. The other thing with Sprint Ray, so I got a Sprint Ray 55S with the ceramic crown kit. I personally love Sprint Ray just because they are innovating probably more than any other 3D printing company. I initially started with an Einstein, and before I ordered the Einstein way long ago. And at some point when Sprint Ray came out with a couple of their newer printers with the bulk speed and everything, I switched from Einstein to Sprint Ray. And Einstein ended up, I think, selling their division, Desktop Health, or their dental division. We won't go there. But you want a company that's going to be in it for the long haul and that can essentially be assistant driven, because that's what I want my Sprint Ray to be. I want it to be assistant driven. I don't really want to have to do it. And I know if you get any of those so-called gumball printers, it's going to be a lot of tinkering on your end. And if you don't want to invest the time in it yourself to learn it, it's going to be very, very hard for an assistant to learn it. Like versus Sprint Ray, it's a plug and play sort of system. They make it fairly straightforward.
100%. And I know you didn't necessarily take advantage of it because we had a lot of other things going on, but I do want to mention that Henry Schein does have a unique financing opportunity called Flex Financing, and 3D printers, intraoral scanners, and CBCT all qualify for that program. So what's unique about it, especially for a startup, is it's designed to give money back based on any merchandise spend growth. So as a startup, you start off at zero. So what the unique thing is about it, if you, let's say you spend $40,000 your first year, you get $4,000 back towards your financing that you're spending with Henry Schein, and that's paid back quarterly. And you also get, I believe it's like $150 back towards the financing for every Reveal clear aligner case that you do as well. So Nick, we haven't necessarily discussed Reveal yet. Maybe it's something we consider in the future, but these
Absolutely.
are unique benefits. There's so many programs that Schein has to take care of you, and it's just a matter of which direction you go with it.
Yeah. And then another thing that is very important is the support you get when you buy these from whatever third party. So like when I initially made this Einstein purchase, or when I first bought it, I did it kind of before I knew I was going with Henry Schein, because it was that long ago, and I had a credit. So I had to keep the credit because they wouldn't give it back to me. So that's why I didn't go with Schein for any of these, because I did that back. And you did push me. You guys are like, switch over. It's like, I'm going to lose like $10,000. You're like, no, but it worked out. So.
Well, thank you. And one of the more crucial parts of doing your startup, right? You had to pick a contractor, you had to pick an architect. Ultimately, I'll just touch on something that Schein does. As you're looking for spaces, you find a space or spaces that you like. Ultimately, when that happens, generally you'll call myself or your equipment specialist, and you'll say, hey, I found a space that I like. I need you to come measure it. There's a few great questions you want to ask your landlord before deciding upon this space, is if they allow for trenching or drilling. That, Nick, your situation, you couldn't necessarily go through the floor, so you might have an added expense or, some plumbing things going on when you put it through the ceiling or the walls. Your most ideal situation is to do trenching or core drilling. Other questions that you want to ask is how much amperage is allocated to the space. You want to know how much electricity is going, because you have so many electrical components in the office. And those are just, you also want to ask if they have a copy of the CAD file that has measurements of the space, so that maybe we don't have to come in and measure it. You can email us a copy of the CAD file, and we can present you within 7 to 10 days of a preliminary look of how your office could turn out. So, Nick, if you could tell us a little bit about how you picked your construction team.
Yeah. So initially I got, I think, 4 bids total for construction. The range anywhere from, I think 360 was the lowest to a little over 500. And when you're considering the entire budget of the project, you really want to stay around that 400 range, because if you start getting near 500, it's going to be extremely difficult unless you got the money behind you to keep up with that. So personally, mine ended up being in the low 4s, very low 4s. The contractor that I chose actually did my previous office that I worked at. So I had a vague idea of what he could do. And not only that, I actually, I think we're going to get on this a little later, but I would just be wary of who you use. All contractors are definitely going to have their little quirks and stuff like that. So you're going to have to make sure that you're staying on them. No one's going to want it as good as you. The best contractor you take is probably going to still take his time and still slow down certain places here and there. So look into who you're going to use before you spend that money, and just make sure you're staying on top of them. You still will have to lift a finger. You still have to do things.
100%. And I can touch more on this, as well as your local consultant will touch on this more when you go through the construction process. But there is a formula that you have to think of when considering the amount of operatories that you want. So the rule of thumb is generally 300 square feet per operatory. And each operatory is not 300 square feet. It's just that the excess square footage makes up for your waiting room, your private office, your ADA accessible bathroom, so on and so forth. So, Nick, when you're looking to do 7 operatories and you do, multiply that by 300, ideally you'd be looking at around a 2,000 usable square foot space, right? And there is such a thing, and depending on the areas that you're looking, as a loss factor. So you could be losing anywhere between 15 to 40% of the advertised rental lease amount of square feet. So, that could be, Nick, you're doing retail space. Your landlord very well may have included the sidewalk in your square footage. In other spaces, if you're on the 3rd floor, it could be your stairwell, hallway, or the elevator. So things that you really have to take into consideration and run by people who know what they're talking about before you even go and start looking at spaces, right?
Yeah. And I think that also leads to our next point. Like, don't try to do everything yourself, which he's getting to right here. For me, I'm always the type A personality, which most dentists are. Like, they want to do everything. Like, I have to see it done. I want to do that filling. I want to do this. And I tried doing that for the first, let's say, 8-9 months of my build out, which ended up being 2 years plus. But I realized once I started, once I started giving some of my responsibility away to, like, my girlfriend helped interior design the space. My mother did a lot of things with, the post office. My uncle designed the signage for the building. My brother did the social media aspect and helped me with videos. Get all these people involved, because, like, my stress level definitely still high, but it decreased from what it was when I was trying to do everything myself. I just don't think it's possible if you're trying to build something on a scale. For me, 33,000 square feet, 7 ops. It's a pretty big office in a city. And again, lead us to our next one. We're talking about designer. So I got very lucky myself. My girlfriend's an interior designer. She helped me tremendously with picking, she guided me in the right direction in terms of finishes for the floor, etc. And if you're just going to use your contractor, specifically a dental contractor, a lot of them will not have that design touch. If you're looking for that niche kind of office, they're literally just going to give you a blank open space, and then you're still going to be left up to doing those little design things. And personally, I was never the greatest designer myself, so having the girlfriend definitely helped me out a little bit. But I would still recommend, if you are looking for that niche boutique, not that Medicaid kind of middle-of-the office, looking to getting a designer, even how costly it's going to be, your contractor's not going to know to do the things that they're gonna.
And an important note to just, take consideration too. A lot of designers might live in another state, and then in their contracts, it says, we'll pay you 1 or 2 visits. And then if they have to visit again, it's an upcharge. My recommendation is to try and find someone local if you can. And going back to the consultant fee, you may pay 50 to 70 grand. A designer may cost around $30,000+ depending on the size of practice and the type of vibe that you're trying to get. So every penny matters, as Nick mentioned earlier. So
absolutely.
Now everyone's obsessed with your marketing. Videos are hilarious. I watch every single one every single day.
Thank you.
Besides your Instagram following, I mean, you did sign up with a marketing company. How did you go about selecting that? What are you doing to make yourself successful in getting all these new patients?
So in terms of marketing, just like I did with everything else, I did multiple bids, right? I spoke to multiple companies. I started with, kind of the big ones, Wondrous, Studio 88, Identity Marketing. And for me, budget is definitely concerned, right? And if you're trying to market yourself as a cosmetic guy, your budget still has to be good to beat out other cosmetic people to get those patients. So what I decided was I'm just really going to push hard for it on my social media and just have a marketing agency that's going to help at least get new patients in the door, get those emergencies and those prophy patients in. Whereas I was focusing on more getting that singular, someone who wants the veneers or someone who wants the implants. So that's how we're kind of doing it, because if you try to work with a marketing company day one and you say you want to be known for implants in your area, you're going to have to spend a ton of money to beat out everyone else who's doing
30,000 plus right off the bat. Yeah,
exactly. And some of the offices that I worked at were like almost only full arch. They were spending 35, 40,000 a month on marketing, and that's not going to happen for a startup. So use your social media to leverage those unique cases that you want, and that just use a regular marketing agency to at least start getting other people in the door.
And
now,
go ahead. Yeah.
So I was just going to say, we're about like 2 weeks. Like I just opened last week, right? So I'm in the second week right now. I started my marketing with my marketing team. They designed my website. They did my logo. They set up my Google, Facebooks, etc. Now I had my website built like a year ago to start with SEO. And just a month ago, I think it was on September 4th, we actually started putting Facebook and Google ads out. So most of these companies will tell you it takes at least a month, 2, if not 3, to start trickling in and starting to see those leads.
Recognizing on your Google page, yeah.
Exactly. So the thing that has been great for me, I think I already have 98 new patients on schedule. I've seen like 40, I've seen like 45 already, and that's only on 3 clinical days. That was mostly from me. That was mostly from my Instagram, from my following that I built. People have been waiting for me. I started an Excel sheet years ago, just building these names so I can have an email blast. So I use me to fill these first 2 months, and then hopefully the marketing kicks in, and that will help push me, not to the finish line, but keep me going on a good rhythm.
And talking about that, there is a big misconception from a lot of your colleagues, unfortunately, that people say to launch your website on the day you open your practice, and it couldn't be so far from being right. And I always recommend actually in the very beginning stage, in your vision stage, being introduced to a marketing company to at least set proper expectations, right? And part of that money we talked about, they say about 6 to 8% of your total production, annual production, should be spent on an annual spend of marketing. So if you take the lowest 6% and you base that on, say, I want to do $1 million my first year of the practice. And so that would be a $60,000 a year annual budget, $5,000 a month. And I see a lot of your colleagues, unfortunately, being in a place where they're only able to afford spending $2,500 to $3,500 a month. And today, depending on the area you're in, it's generally not enough. So
well, most people spend less than that. Consultants usually recommend $1,500 to start. Most of them that I've spoken to. But if you speak to the marketing agencies, they'll tell you more and more. Personally, I'm around $4,000 for that a month. But again, I have my social media as my backup. I'll probably increase that expenditure over the next couple months when I start getting a little bit money in. But again, it's a great point, something to keep in mind.
Thank you. And I'm not poo-pooing on colleagues when I put this up, but and I'm not saying I'm the best thing since sliced bread either, but I've done over 100 practices, so I like to think I know a thing or two. And I hate when a dentist comes to me and they're like, well, my friend said you should do this. And I'm like, that's so wrong. Like launching your website when you open or something. So could you talk a little bit about you took a little bit from everyone, right?
Yeah. And you can't listen to your direct colleagues, right? Even if you're friends with them, because their vision of their office might not be what you expect yours, right? Like your buddy might have a $2 million office, but it's a Medicaid practice and you're looking for that fee for service office. Those are 2 different models. So if you're taking advice from him, too much from him, and then maybe from someone else, be wary. Take a little from what I did. I took a little bit from everyone. I didn't take full advice from one person or another just because I had to look out for my best interests and what I thought my vision was going to be. So just be wary who you ask for advice. And if you are going to listen to their advice, make sure they're at least on a trajectory of what your practice is going to be like.
Thank you. And the second to last slide here, a very important part of your practice is figuring out a budget for how much it's going to cost for your supply order. And, you know, I always offer my customers, and a lot of my colleagues do this around the country. We sit down with our doctors, we funnel through the catalog, or what I like to call this list, an ideal practice startup list. I've built this over the last 10 years that I've worked at Shine. And Nick, we went line by line on this list. And
Yep.
Could you tell me a little bit about that process and how it might have been if you didn't do that with me?
I don't know how anyone would do that themselves, because there's like so many little things that you don't even know that you need. And he has this Excel sheet that you literally start, and he actually does it in a good way where he starts with the boring stuff first, and by like hour 2, he starts getting to the fun stuff. Yeah. So like it helped tremendously. You're going to miss things on your orders regardless, but this is going to get you the most complete of what you need. And if you don't know, you just ask Alan, what does the normal or office order for cotton rolls? Because like I didn't know how many cotton rolls I would need for my office. And then Alan even knows the first day I was already calling him asking, oh, shoot, we forgot this, we forgot that. And then he placed those orders. I have them the next day. It just makes it very convenient. This list was one of my favorite things that Alan did, just because it was very concise and it helped me a lot.
Thank you. And we didn't miss too much though, like 5 items, right?
Like it's the small things.
and just like, you know, there's also things that I mentioned too that, you know, not a lot of your colleagues may even know about certain products on the market. Like we have a particular relationship, Henry Schein, with Clinician's Choice. So I know I oversold it a little bit, but you're really happy with like Cling to temp cement, enamel shade. You can use it for the anterior and posterior, and like the dual force matrix kit, right? Like you mentioned, you love those things.
Yeah. So like being the Koi strain, right? We have specific things that we like to use from John recommending those. So like I knew I was going to get those, but then there's those other things that like, you know, John doesn't recommend one thing or the other. So it's kind of clinician's choice, like my choice at this period. You know, for me, one was the Garrison band. I've always used Garrisons, and I love Garrison.
I was like, trust me, please.
and I've already done 30 fillings in a week and a half, and they've been working great for me. So take his recommendations, some of them here and there, pick some. Everyone he's given me so far has worked out great. And I've obviously saved money because I've not gotten the name brand one. I've not gotten the really expensive one. I've been saving a little money here and there by doing those things.
And budget-wise, you know, you were already put into our platinum level of Thrive Rewards with the amount of equipment spent and everything that you did with us, including just your merchandise list alone. So not only did you get a rebate back after you purchased everything with us, you also got an 18-month extended labor warranty. And you know, aside from what a lot of your colleagues like to say that Henry Schein is of the more expensive companies on the market, you know, when you create a relationship with a local rep, you're able to stay well within your budget. And I ask you personally, do you feel like you got a great deal?
I think I did. I mean, I feel like you and Adam, who was also helping with this, had my back during it. And if I've had an issue, you guys have jumped on it right away. Now, let's say I went to certain Net 32 and other places to try to make these orders. I wouldn't have had someone who I would have been able to call day one and be like, what's going on with my water unit? You know, what's going on with this? So like that has been tremendous with doing the personal relationship with someone nearby who can help, such as Alan.
Or when you were texting me at 4:50 today and cut off technically like 4 o'clock for orders and I got your stuff the next day you need it, right?
You're like, you better hurry up.
So thank you for that. And, you know, I always take this last slide of my presentation to say, you know, it's really never too early to start having these conversations. Nick called me well in advance of doing his startup. I remember I'm like walking through the park at Palisades Park and Nick calls me. I'm like, I've been waiting for this day. Like, what's happening? And, you know, I give this presentation to residents or new grads or, you know, people, you know, still in dental school. And I'm more than happy to give that information, as is any other Henry Schein rep across the country, because we'd rather inform people early on and help prepare you guys for this journey. So my contact information's below. You know, if you're in another area, happy to connect you with, you know, your local person. Nick, do you have any other points to make before we turn to questions?
going based off him also, if you guys ever have any questions about the startup journey, feel free to shoot me a DM. Obviously it was dr.nickc. I'm more than happy to help. I've been through the ringer and a lot of issues that I think maybe not everyone has had all of them. So if you have any questions about anyone, feel free to shoot me a message.
Thank you. I've already turned like 5 people on to you since we did this. So
awesome.
So Shirley, I think we have a couple questions in the Q&A.
Yes, that was phenomenal. That was just so edifying. Thank you so much for an amazing presentation. I learned so much. I'm not a dentist, but just all of these great tips and basically hashing out a blueprint and the importance of seeking help. So that was awesome. And yes, so we have some questions here. And before I get to the questions, I did put in the Instagram handles for Dr. Nick and for Alan. So please make sure to go and follow them if you'd like. The information's there. And yes, let me start.
And just before you go to the Q&A, I did want to make a point, which I think you were including the link as well for our Thrive Live 2024. It's in Las Vegas. It'll be at the Bellagio. I can't think of a better way to really network yourself, be social, meet a lot of your colleagues who have done this journey, learn about new, to date, innovative technology. Henry Schein's really done an incredible job to create this platform. I think this is our 3rd year doing Thrive Live. So massive convention, great entertainment, really well priced. I think you get like 13 CEs or something like that. It's May 2nd to the 4th. So,
pool party season.
What's that?
But it's pool party season, I think.
Well, right? And, so May 2nd to the 4th, Shirley will provide the link. I'm also going to post it on my Instagram after we're done tonight. So any questions about anything, we're going to turn to the Q&A now.
Awesome. Yes, Alan. And that information is now in there. So thank you for that reminder, as well as the date. Okay, so yes, we have a few questions in the queue. I'll start with the first one from an anonymous attendee. And it sounds like this is for Dr. Nick, but I'm sure Alan's going to have something to say here too. What size sensors did you get? Pedo startup here and not sure what to get.
I think I did 1, 1.5, and 1, 2. I believe I did with Vodtech, but with pediatrics, that's different. So Alan might know a little better.
Now, so a lot of my pediatrics do get away with using like a size 1.5. You could use a Carina Henry Schein sensor or like a Dexis titanium sensor. They're kind of a one-size-fits-all sensor of the most comfortable sensor on the market. And when you buy that one sensor, you don't have to then buy a size 1, 1.5, or 2. You literally just have that kind of one size fits all. But for pediatrics specifically, they often use like phosphor plates, which can be more comfortable for pediatrics. But if you don't want to use phosphor plates, you could definitely get away with getting like a size 0 and a 1.
Okay, thank you. The next question from Dr. Iacovano. Thoughts on dental CPA? Any thoughts on dental CPA?
Yeah, Nick, do you want? I've got a response for that, but if you
yes,
on yours.
So I actually do have a dental specific CPA. They actually do my finance. They're like my financial advisor. They do everything all encompassing. I've literally been with them since senior year of dental school, and they saved me so much money doing the things that I don't know how to do. So I would recommend doing someone because initially when I started, I think like I was using for like right before I moved to this team, I was using one of my father's accountants, and they had no idea about the intricacies of dental write-offs and getting an S Corp and doing those things to leverage what you can for dentistry, right? So I highly recommend doing it. I know Alan's probably going to have to say more about that, but definitely, do that.
That was very well said. I mean, feel free to give your guy a shout out too. I think he's a great resource for dentists specifically. So
yeah, Joe DeMarco, CFS Dental Division. I think that's their big brand of the company, but they've been great. I actually stayed with him. He was with a different company first. I switched with him, and now he's the owner of this one. just tremendous people there. They take care of everything. They even take care of my malpractice, my disability, all those little things. They tell me when I'm running up. So like, they're like, hey, you need to renew this. We filled out the paperwork. Just put your signature on it and send the money. So like, for me, even that, the ease of mind, I know I'm not going to lapse on any of my insurances because they also take care of that too.
Yeah, and locally, just in the tri-state, if you want like a specific CPA at all, I refer a lot of my clients to LLI Advisory. Jerry Icavano is one of the members there. But at the end of the day, to be specific to the question, I definitely recommend dental specific. There's a lot of write-offs specific to dentists and dental equipment that your run-of-the-mill, CPA may not be familiar with. So I think that's the best way to answer that.
Yep.
Okay, great. This question from an anonymous attendee: how do we access the supply order Excel sheet?
Well,
he holds on to that like goal. Okay.
That's my goal. When you commit your business to Shine, you get that spreadsheet. That's, we go line by line. We spend that 3 hours. I actually never send the spreadsheet out to anybody. Not because for any particular reason, but really because, like Nick said, I add a lot of value as we're going through it. And not every item on that list is exactly what we end up with. It's just a category. And we say, Nick, what do you like to use? And then I'll make a recommendation for something maybe that's half the price that won't hurt his clinical care.
And also, like, that took you so much time to do.
10 years. Yeah.
So much knowledge. Like, I wouldn't pass that out either.
Yeah, they're not.
All right.
Cool. This next question is from Keith Williams. Can you speak more about the merchandise sending financing program?
Oh, sure. The flex financing. Yeah. I'd maybe like to know if there's any specific questions about it, but basically, how do I say this? If you have the ability to get separate financing outside of your main financing, one way to suggest that is once your loan closes with your primary financier, you can then look into third-party options. So let's say like Nick got $650 for his loan, but really maybe he needed $800. If they weren't willing to give him that additional $150 and he needed the CBCT 3D printer and a scanner, you can then do that through flex financing through Henry Schein. If the stars align and all your credit and all that is great. And, there's a great rate with the flex financing. And then whatever you spend in merchandise for the term of that loan, you're going to get 10% back off all incremental spend over let's say it's a 5-year period, and you get that paid back quarterly. And additionally, like I said earlier, if you commit yourself to Reveal clear aligners, that's another added bonus. For every case you do, that comes off the financing as well.
And I would have gotten the flex financing too, but since how long my process was, I bought my Trios, I brought my 3D printer way before, when I was still making decent money as an associate. And then at the end, the last thing I had was a CT, and I just paid cash for the CT. So like, if I didn't, I would have needed to use that to get that CT and to do that.
Thank you.
Interesting. Okay, this next question from Dr. Milka Mendez Ceballos. If I open a pediatric dental office in 60 days, what are your 3 top tips?
Nick, you want to start with that one?
Well, I mean, this is pediatrics. I mean, I'm selling ears over here. I'm not selling.
One thing that we didn't mention was when we go over the supply order, right, Nick? So, prices change, right? Manufacturers raise their prices over time. So going over and giving you my discount in the beginning can be a little, wavy, but it gives you an idea of what you'll be spending. So the thing is, like, when it comes to instrumentation, I don't go over instrumentation or carbides, diamonds, and polishers personally when I go over the list. I think that, my doctor should feel, touch, look at burr wallets and see what they want. So I have my doctors meet with, whether it's Q3D, Titan, Norden, whatever their specific instrument company, and they make that list with that manufacturer. That being said, instruments are oftentimes items that are back ordered for whatever reason, many of them. So Nick might want that like Carver or that, composite instrument on day one, and maybe it's back ordered. So 5 to 6 weeks out is generally what I recommend to place that order with the manufacturer of your choice to make sure it comes when you want it in your office. Being 60 days out, that's one major thing I'd recommend that you do right now. Also, AEDs are on like a 4 or 5 month back order. So, I generally nowadays am placing an order for an AED the second a doctor signs their lease, because otherwise you may be, hung out to dry on an AED, and you need it for compliance to open your practice.
And also for the 60-day thing, marketing wise, I'll touch on that. Like, start building the brand awareness now. Make sure you have the Instagram, you have the Facebooks running. You start talking about it with friends. You maybe get some customized merchandise like T-shirts and hats, because your 60 days, this is when you're building that Excel sheet with all those names now. So you really want to be putting in the footwork now and making sure that your friends, your family, they all know your brand name. So then when you open, they're spreading it too.
100%. And the other thing too, which we didn't touch on, was doing credentialing for your office. So many offices these days are in network with insurances, and that is a lengthy process. Henry Schein uses Unitas PPO Solutions. They're a phenomenal company and have a spotlight program, they call it, where I believe it's like 6-7 months where they do the program. They charge you monthly, and it really takes some time. So again, the second you sign your lease is when you should start credentialing, and not before, because it's specific to the 5-digit zip code. So if you didn't get the space that you want, you just paid all this money, and then you got to do it again.
Yep. And I think mine took about 45 days for when I started getting my first ones to start approving me. So great advice. Definitely start on the insurance.
Thank you.
And this one from Dr. Enyan: how much do you recommend having in savings before doing a startup? I know a lot of banks require 10% liquidity in savings, but how much do you expect to pay OOP out of pocket?
Nick, you probably had some good conversations about that when you were first getting approved. Do you have some insight on that?
Yeah. So you're gonna want to have at least 10%. That's basic. So like if it's a $700,000 loan, you're gonna have at least $70,000. Personally, I had much more than that, and your rate's gonna vary based on how much you have. I have had some friends who've had some difficulties getting the loans, and also keep in mind, if you did buy a house, okay, or any other big things that you are on the line for,
don't buy those expensive cars before you build your practice.
Yeah, so like I just got really lucky. I signed my lease before I bought my house, because I just got my house like 6 or 7 months ago. If I did it the opposite way, every bank was telling me it's going to take you 2 years until you can get a mortgage for your house. So try to do the practice first if you can. I would say at least have 6 figures saved if you could. Because for me personally, there's so many extra things I didn't realize I would have to buy. So many insurances that aren't really taken account for in that $700K budget. Water heater breaks. I just broke on me the third day. So like little things like that, you need to have a little in the bank for. So I would at least get that bank a little bit higher before you think about jumping in. So higher, more than 10%, in my opinion.
Nick knows more than me. But don't buy the expensive car. Yeah.
Don't do that.
And this next question from an anonymous attendee: could you go over how and why you chose the PM software?
Yeah. Nick, what did you end up using for practice management software?
So I use Open Dental.
Okay. And what was the reason that you ended up picking?
I like the fact that I didn't want something cloud-based personally. I like server-based. Not only that, like Open Dental, pretty much everything integrates with Open Dental because obviously it's an open platform. And for me, I'm using Flex, Mango, a couple of those other third-party, and they directly integrate with Open Dental. Open Dental might look archaic because it does. It looks old, but everything is there and it's pretty easy to learn quickly. And another thing I was thinking about, my goal is not just for one office. I'm hoping 3, maybe 4. So having something that I can train staff on at multiple offices and it would be repeatable was important. Whereas like if you go with like a niche software and there's a couple out there, you know, there's one that's just Koi specific also. I was afraid if I open up a second office and let's say I partner with someone who's not a Kois guy, how are they going to use that specific software? So like, keep in mind your staff, you need to find assistants, you need to find hygienists, you need to find front desk and receptionists that are going to know how to use your software. So stick with like the bigger name brand ones and something that you're comfortable with. And that's why I chose a server-based one.
Thank you. And Nick, it's great to hear that you're thinking second, third, and fourth locations, and good thing we're friends because on that note, I do want to mention to everyone on the call today that, you know, Henry Schein is one of the leaders with group practices. So, you know, we definitely have of the best tools in the industry when it comes to DSOs become such a dirty word in the industry, but group practices. So if anyone's also thinking anything about that, Henry Schein, our team, can definitely help you with that as well. Practice management software, Henry Schein does have Dentrix Ascend and Dentrix, both very different, but also alike. So we do have some great software sales reps who, if at any point, we're more than happy to do the pros and cons. If you have questions about Open Dental, Curve, any of those out there, more than happy to be honest and say what benefits those have versus ours. And you can pick. Maybe you do want a cloud-based solution. There's lots of great benefits. Nick decided not to. Many people choose either or. So.
And this next question from an anonymous attendee, does VATech have a size 0? If not, what's something that works well with VATech or VATech? I'm not sure how that's pronounced.
I'm not sure if they have a size 0.
Game on me. I think there's only, you know, like you said, 1, 1.5, and 2, but Shit's have a size 0.
And something to be aware of too, VATech has kind of like a closed system. So like you can't really just plug and play other sensors unless you like twain it. And if you twain it, it might not work. So like keep that in mind when you're choosing your x-ray system. You want something that, you know, you have to stay within the same system or you have to know they're allowed third parties to kind of integrate with them.
100%. And, you know, to name a few, like I believe Plan Mecca has a size 0. They use Romex's software. Schick has a size 0, 1, and 2. So ultimately, when you are sitting with your local consultant, Henry Schein or whomever, you want to definitely ask them what integrates with XYZ. You know, you may not want to get like a Cabo CBCT with Schick sensors and like a Trio scanner. You know, like maybe you want to do milling and you want a more seamless integration. So you may choose a Prime scan with a Prime mill and perhaps a Sirona CBCT. It all depends on what you're trying to achieve. So, and Nick can still mill with his Trio scanner. He may just consider something more like a Plan Mecca mill.
Okay, great. And this next question from Dr. Aman Kumar. Does Dr. Nick have room for another dentist to join? I'll be there soon. All jokes aside, thank you so much for a very informative session, it says. Thoughts on renting versus buying out for a startup? Also, what material do you use for the printed crowns? I go back and forth between a mill versus 3D printing.
I can touch on the rented versus buying, but Nick, you want to take everything else?
Yeah, but firstly, looking back, I rented. I wish I bought because dealing with landlord hasn't been great for me, and it's caused me probably more stress than anything. Even though I got $104,000 worth of tenant improvement from them, which he was probably going to touch on. It's just know who you're getting into bed with. If it's a good management company that's managing the building, I've had so many darn issues. I'm looking back and I'm like, I wish I could have bought this place because it would have saved me some headaches.
And just so on that note, you know, I would agree if there's a situation that makes sense to buy, 100% go ahead with it. You know, there's definitely several different advisors who can advise on whether or not that's a great idea based on whatever you're looking at. but there's many like tax benefits, like you can pay yourself back the rent and stuff. Don't take that advice, by the way. I don't know how talk to a CPA, but like, if you're in Manhattan, unless you won the lottery, and I don't know, what, kind of family you came from and can afford the real estate there, it's very tough. And you have to be also weary of co-ops, because when it comes time to sell your practice down the line, a co-op board may say that you have to be owner occupied. And like group practices these days, I don't know a single one personally that purchases real estate. So, if you have to be owner occupied and you're trying to sell your space, that automatically limits who can purchase your practice like by 80%.
Yeah, and not only that, they'll also try to fit in things when in your lease. Like my one friend who's opening up a pediatric office down the shore, they tried to fit in like something he can only sell to someone who has an equal or greater net worth than him. So like, what happens if at that point he's trying to sell like a newer dentist or someone like that, and then you can't sell in 10 or 15 years when you're ready to sell? Whereas if you're the owner, there's no rules like that.
I will say in the tri-state, very seldom do I have doctors purchase the real estate versus leasing. It's just very
the nature of the beast.
If you're like maybe Texas, I don't know. I heard it's cheaper down there.
So getting on the crown resin. So personally, I have the Sprint Road to ceramic crown resin. It's the only one that's FDA approved to be in the mouth as a permanent restoration, because I think it has 51% ceramic particles. I personally am not using that as a final restoration right now. I don't even think Wally Wren down at Mod Institute is really considering it permanent. He's kind of considering it an in-between option. Like, it's not quite ceramic, but it's better than resin. It's kind of this in-between option. He's also, I think, fee for service, so he prices it at a middle point. If you're insurance-based, you have to take this into account. Yes, you can code it as a ceramic, but the studies, they haven't really been in people's mouth for more than 3 or 4 years. So what happens if you start placing all of these and you're placing them as ceramics, then all of a sudden 4 years, everyone just starts coming back like, clockwork, and you have to replace them all. Look at it more as a temporary restoration, long-term temporary, something more affordable for patients right now. But I wouldn't compare it to a mill quite yet, because it isn't there for final restorations.
Huh. Wow. Okay. Whether to go to C Corp, S Corp, PC, etc. What are your thoughts for a dental practice startup? And that's from Dr. Aman Kumar.
I think that everyone's situation can be different, and there might not be a straight way to answer that. I would highly advise speaking to, like we said, a dental specific CPA to answer that. Nick, if you're comfortable talking about how you structured yours.
Yes. So I'm an S Corp. Originally, when I started working, I was working in Manhattan, but I was living in New Jersey. And at this time, when I created the S Corp, I was still with my previous accountant who wasn't dental specific. Okay. So he recommended an S Corp since I was going out of state with any sort of the tax implications with coming from New York to New Jersey, because there are some ones. Looking back at it, when I spoke to my CPAs, they were like, it probably would have been smart just to do an LLC to start. But the good thing about starting with an S Corp, you can always change to an LLC. It's fairly, from what I heard, easier going that way than it is going the opposite way. I may be wrong, so make sure, obviously, you ask your CPA about this, but I personally am an S Corp. S Corp provides you a little bit more room for doing write-offs, going out to business dinners and doing, writing off maybe gas and certain things like that if you're a traveling associate.
The dinner's on you. Got it.
Dinner. we just got to mention one thing, dentistry, and we're good. Just kidding. Don't come after me. But I was an S Corp. A lot of my friends were LLCs. It kind of just depends based on where you are in your career.
Awesome.
And this one from an anonymous attendee: how did you figure out a budget when starting the financing process?
It's pretty straight. I mean, it's from what I understood when I was speaking to everyone about this, because I didn't know where to start either. They all give you this relatively same-ish numbers, 650, 750. I know this depends based on where you are and location in across the United States. But where I was, it just seemed like it was a consensus. It was 650 to 750 was kind of the bare of what you needed to get an office off the ground.
And when we go through this slide too, when I present to my startups, I go through and I ask what your ideal practice size is going to be. So if Nick said, I want a 7-op practice, I would have turned around and said, hey, high end of construction budget with plumbed nitrous and whatever type of partitions, you might be looking at $230 a square foot, times the 2,000 square feet we talked about earlier. So if we take those numbers, you're looking at about a $460,000 budget. You said you spent around $4, right?
For construction, you have 420s, 430s.
Yeah. So I would have been right on the money with the advice I would have given, or what I did give. Sorry. And then we go through and we talk about ranges of, depending on the type of equipment you're going to buy, it might cost X per operatory. So 3 ops, we'd give that figure maybe about 150,000 or something all in each op. And then, we take an IT budget of around $30,000, supply cost of around $25,000, marketing budget of around, let's call it $50,000. You're at about $715. So, money, when you talk to your Shine consultant, we're pretty on the money with those budgets, and we can do that as early as graduating residency. So you can definitely be prepared if you have an idea of the type of practice that you want to build.
Yep.
And then there was a follow-up question. I'm not sure if you already answered it, but let me just read it to you anyway. It was a follow-up question about the pediatric startup. And that anonymous attendee is going with Vatek for sensors and size. I'm going with Vatek for sensors, and size 0 is not an option. Right. What size do you recommend for the promo buy 2 get 1 free?
I think they only do 1, 1.5, and 2, so I'd probably just do 2 1s. 1, 1.5 would make sense. But
yeah, and then consider doing the.
Remember, yeah, and you can always get a CT unit that does like the bite wings, like, you know what I mean? There's ones that do the pediatric bite wings. I mean, I never got into those, but it is an option also.
Yep.
Okay. Great. And then, they wanted us to write the names of the CPAs that were recommended in the chat. I can certainly write those.
I'll actually type it in there right now.
Great. Terrific. Thank you.
You got mine too, some CVS?
Yeah. CFS, yeah.
And if you go with CFS, tell them I sent you, because I've been with them for a long time. So they should.
Nice. Appreciate that. Yeah, for sure.
No, give me a shout out as well.
Yeah.
We both want shout out.
Give a shout out to everyone. And okay, this one from Dr. Tamana Gandhi. Which EHR software did you choose, and how did you decide?
Are you sure what EHR is too?
Yeah.
Electronic
health record.
Maybe.
Can
that person? Yeah, we'll go back to that one after they specify.
Okay, great. If you could, Tamana, Dr. Gandhi, if you could please specify, that would help us. We'll come right back to your question. This one from Dr.
I think it might be electronic health records. You might be right.
She might be right, but that's usually taken care of inside your PMS software. That sounds like it's more of a medical thing to me.
Yep.
Okay, and this one from Dr. David Eng. What are the current dental startup interest rates for a lease build-out? How much is the average amount of loan currently, and how much liquid should you have to secure them?
I think we touched on all of that already in the 10% conversation, the amount of loans that are given, as well as what was the start of that question?
Yeah, I think it's 1%.
Yeah.
That's going to vary. You have to, each bank's going to be different. One recommendation I'd give is definitely talk to 3 banks. Okay. I'm not going to say to go to anyone in particular, but some of the bigger name banks are like Bank of America, Wells Fargo. Provide's been a big one. They're a newer player in the game. There's PNC, there's TD, whoever.
Huntington.
Huntington. Maybe it's something you already banked with that you might get a better rate with because you've banked with them. But if you end up loving one specific banker, and you get a more competitive rate elsewhere, it's likely that you can always take the rate back to their underwriters, and then they might even be able to match that rate. So it's really about, at the end of the day, yes, rate's important, but the program they give you, let's say like interest-only payments for X amount of years, is super important, because things like that give you time to grow your practice and make larger payments later after you grow.
Yeah, and a lot of them will have like I think my Provide 2 years interest only payments, and then like I think B of A had something where they had like a grading scale where like it would start at 25%, then 50, then 75, then 100. So all of them are slightly different on how they term it. So just see what works with you. And I think rates right now, 6.5 to 7.5, just so you guys get an idea. That's kind of what's still out there right now.
But Shine does have a Q4 promo of 0% for 12 months on a lot of core equipment, as well as 4.99 for 5 years. So
just start out there.
Great. And this one from an anonymous attendee. I think you guys have answered this one a couple times, but let me just read it anyway. Vatek is only size 1, 1.5, 2, no size 0. What do you recommend for pedo from Vatek? I think
we did.
Yeah, you could use, yeah, we got that.
Okay, great. And this one from Dr. Keith Williams. I'm a pedo ortho doc looking to do a dual practice startup practice. Do you have any recommendations on practice management software that does both pedo and ortho officially? I find that a lot of offices go with 2 different software.
I've had plenty of offices use Dentrix for pediatrics. I know ortho, like a lot of ortho, I don't even know if it still exists, but Dolphin was like a practice management software that I've known of. It just, a lot of my offices do, regardless, end up with like Dentrix Ascend or Dentrix, and you don't have to be specialty specific. Definitely not for pediatrics, in my opinion. Ortho's a bit different. That I could understand, but if you want one that works for both, I think the Dentrix is a great solution.
Great. Okay, this is from an anonymous attendee. With Open Dental, what communication system do you recommend, Flex or Weave?
So there's definitely a few softwares out there. I'm using a Flex Mango combination because they obviously both integrate with Open Dental. I am not 100% sure if Weave does. And Weave is also one of the more expensive ones out of all of them. I would also look into like Casper. There's a couple other ones that are a little bit more inclusive. But personally, just from using Flex the past month, it has been tremendous, and I've really loved using their product. It's integrated great with Open Dental.
So, and I just, because my amazing Jerry is always following me and he's up this late. Jerry's on the webinar with us. He did say that it's easier to go from LLC to S Corp, so not the other way around. So he said,
got it wrong.
What's that?
I got it wrong.
Well, so he, it's okay. We all make mistakes. And so he said startups should always be LLC. So coming from a dental specific CPA.
So don't follow Dr. Nick in terms of that.
Wow, it does look like those are all the questions we answered. We got to a lot of wonderful questions tonight. So I would like to thank you again, Dr. C and Alan, for a really amazing and edifying presentation this evening. And thank all of you for joining us tonight. We did record tonight's webinar, and we'll email the recording out sometime in the next week. We would appreciate your feedback via our survey that will pop up on your screen shortly. Just a reminder to look at the chat and copy all that wonderful information that we posted in there, or save the chat. Thank you all for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you all on future webinars. That was really wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shirley. Thanks, Alan.
Bye. Good night, everybody.
See you guys.